This video is meant to help you out with the project second task. So I'm going to do a video on qualitative data and then on quantitative data. I think you should have the visually descriptive statistics well in hand, so that's not going to be my focus. My focus is mainly going to be on the confidence interval. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do for this is I'm going to want to take my qualitative data and I'm going to want to input it. And so what I did was I went out and I sampled by looking at cars in faculty lots. And then I entered in whether they were a hybrid or not based upon the code key here of 1 for a hybrid and 0 for a non-hybrid. It's much easier to use numbers than it is to use a yes or a no or a hybrid, non-hybrid, just in terms of taking care of those counts using Excel. So we oftentimes will use numbers that really don't truly mean numbers. These are simply numbers that are qualitative data points. So just like before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Excel to count these things. So I have data points here from 1 down to, I believe it's 50, 2 down to, I think it's, let's see, how many do I have? Ooh, I have a lot more than I thought. 75 here. So I'm going to use those data points in order to count. So I say count if, and that's A2 through A70, what did I say, 72? Was that it? Scroll down here again. Nope, 75. A75. And I'm going to count those. The hybrids are 1, so I'm going to count them if they're 1s. And then I'm going to say count if, and then I'm going to say, okay, my A1 through, A2 through A75, and that is if it's a 0. And now I've counted those. Now my total, I'm just going to sum these up here, and this is sum of G, and this is 3, and let's see, no, not G3, G4, actually I'm just going to do this, G4, and then plus G5, and that will give me my sum. So now I have the total number in my sample, that's my n right there, that's n, and then I have my x's, which are the 11 here that are hybrids. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to create what the sample proportion is. So the proportion that are hybrid, that's my p hat, that is equal to my G3 divided by my H5. And, oops, not G3, it's G4 divided by H5. And that's my p hats. Now, I can make my q hat by doing 63 divided by 74, or I could simply do 1 minus p hat. So 1 minus, and then my p hat, which is H and 7 there, that will be my p hat. Now, I only want to see these as percentages maybe, or as decimals, so I'm going to go to data, or I'm going to go to format, cells, and I'm going to ask that these are numbers, and I'm going to have them to, if probabilities, I should use 3 decimal places for probabilities, and so if I put them out to 4 decimal places, then I'll be sure that I'll not incur any round offs. So if I round it to 4 decimal places, that'll give me a little bit of wiggle room, but not too much wiggle room. And that's the same as using 2 decimal places and a percentage. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to find my critical value, because I'm going to need a confidence interval, an 80% confidence interval for this qualitative data. Now p hats, those are binomially distributive random variables at their heart, and the p hats sampling distribution is the normal distribution. So this critical value that I need is the inverse from the inverse normal. So I have the inverse, the normal, and the inverse there. That's norm.inv. And when I click the right or left parenthesis, it tells me, okay, what probability do I want? So this is the probability to the left of the value that I want, and I am going to use the positive value here. So remember that I have an 80% confidence level, and so my 80% confidence level means that there is 10% in each tail, which means there's 90% to the left of the positive value with a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. That means it's the standard normal. And so there's my value. Now this value again, I'm going to format this so that I only get those 3 values in the decimal place that I normally would. So now I have my critical value. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to form my margin of error. So my margin of error is going to be made up of this critical value here, and then I have to have my standard error. So remember that my standard error, let me just go ahead and write this out over here. My standard error is made up of p hat times q hat divided by n's root. So I'm going to say that this is the square root of, and this is p hat, which is h7 multiplied by h8, and then that's going to be divided by the n, which is h, and that is, let's see, 5, h5. And that is my standard error. So this value again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to format that cell to 4 decimal places, so a number with 4 decimal places, and then I can use that as my standard error. So now my margin of error looks like the critical value, that's D6, and that gets multiplied by the standard error, which is G10. And that will give me my margin of error. Now again, I'm going to want this rounded to 4 decimal places, so a number with 4 decimals, and then I can go ahead and create my confidence interval here. The lower limit of my confidence interval, that's going to be my proportion of hybrids, which is H5, no, not 5, 6, 7, H7, and that one is plus my margin of error, which is E8, and that's the value. Uh-oh, I hope this doesn't crash on me. Okay, and then my next one here, this one is equal to, and this is my proportion of hybrids, which is H7, and then this is going to be minus my margin of error, which is E8. So those are the values, and there are my lower and upper limits. Now if it makes you happier to have these as percentages, then we can go ahead and change them to percentages here. So I'm going to go, this is going to be equal to D10, this one's going to be equal to D11, and then I'll format these in the appropriate way. Remember the appropriate round is to 3 decimal places, so I'm going to go ahead and format these cells to a percentage with 2 decimal places. And there we go, or 1 with decimal place, because that's 3 significant figures. And there we go. We have that range of values. So that would be how I would create my confidence interval. All right, now the next one I do will be for our quantitative data.